I sold Whole Foods Market and Publix the first pound of American grass-fed beef that they marketed as American grass-fed beef. And that was just fortuitous. I was just lucky. I didn't see that coming. I just wanted to raise cattle differently. I don't think you can come up with a single natural ecosystem in the world that just has one species of animal or plant or microbe. It's always a plethora of species living in symbiotic relationships with each other. And I thought I was happy then. I mean, I've always enjoyed what I did, but I love what I do.
All right. I am very pleased and excited to bring back and welcome again Mr. Will Harris, who is some of you may be familiar with. I've been known Will for a number of years now, and he's been doing some wonderful work. He has written a new book, which I think I got about 50 pages left in this thing. This is A Bold Return to Giving a Damn, which is a tremendous book, by the way. And thanks for writing that and sharing that, sending it out my way. For those who don't know you, just maybe in a brief synopsis, tell us who you are.
I am Will Harris. My farm in Bluffton, Georgia is called White Oak Pastures. I am the fourth generation of my family to manage this farm, own this farm. I have two daughters and their spouses who are in their 30s back helping to run it today. And they've got 5 babies who are the 6th generation on the farm, although they have not contributed yet.
They will, I'm sure. This sort of new thing, regenerative agriculture, which is not new to you. You were probably one of the earlier adopters. Certainly, I know you've been doing this for quite a while now. At great personal risk, you made that transition from sort of commodity beef to what you feel is farming in a more appropriate way, a way that sort of aligns with nature and improves biodiversity. And clearly you've demonstrated, like probably very few other people have, how impactful and how powerful and how perhaps correct this way is to do this. And I know I've read most of your book. Like I said, I know that, and this is the exciting part for me, is you talk about the last part of that title, One Farm, 6 Generations, and the future of food. And I want to hear about the future of food, because obviously that's what I want to be eating in the future. So I'd like to know about that. But what prompted you to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with the way I've been doing it, the way my daddy did it, the way my grandfather did it? What made that change? And I guess maybe touch on a little bit of, it was a struggle. It's challenging.
So my dad took over the farm in 1946. And he was the first generation of my family to really move into industrial farming. And under his watch, it became a monoculture of only cattle, using all the tools to make food cheaper. He ran the farm that way all his career. All my life, I never wanted to do anything except run the farm and to run it industrially, just like my dad did. And I went to when I graduated from high school, I went to the University of Georgia, majored in animal science, came home and I further industrialized the farm and ran it that way for 20 years. At a point, the excesses of it became so great, I couldn't look away anymore.
You were good at it, Will. You were like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to maximize it. A sense of competitive spirit in you, like I do. I like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it balls to the wall and win, basically. And so you had maximized industrial farming. Is that fair to say in your mind?
I do everything I do as hard as I can do it. And when I was in the industrial model, I maxed that out. And probably that's what caused me to make the change. I was the abuser. If the label instruction said use 2 cc's per hundredweight, I used 3 or 4. If it said put a pint to the acre, I put a quart.
What were your metrics? What were you measuring? You're measuring cattle weight gain, or what was your like, this is my goal? What were you trying to achieve when you were doing that?
Dollars profit was the goal, and the cattle weight gain was the metric. How many pounds of beef could I? That was a monoculture of only cattle during my watch, that part of my watch. And my goal that I measured very carefully was to see how much beef I could squeeze out of this farm every year. At that point, I was a one stop in the linear pipeline getting beef to the public.
Where did you start when you took over from your dad to where you ended the industrial experiment? How much did you say I could get X amount of dollars or this much of cattle out of my land versus where did you get to? Yeah,
we could sell $1 million and a half dollars worth of beef a year. And that was what I wanted to do. And at that level, we were profitable. I went back and looked, and we never lost money in the industrial model. We certainly weren't rich people, but we had a paid for farm. We were good industrial cattle people, and we generated a profit every year.
And that's something that a lot of ranchers would love to be able to do. And I know a lot of them don't generate profit in a year. They barely make a profit many years, and sometimes they're running negative. Is that fair to say?
That is fair. And when I transitioned, I had several years of losses, and I was fortunate. We were able to afford it, but we couldn't have afforded it forever. The timing was very fortunate in us moving into this kinder, gentler agriculture, and we were able to market all the beef we could produce at a profit. It's gotten harder in recent years, but we were in a sweet spot.
Yeah, and as someone whose metric was profit, how much beef can I get out of this land? How much money can I make off it? And then you go into a situation where you're like, hey, I'm not making money. I'm losing money. How did you cope with that? And because the uncertain the future would have still have been uncertain, and as it probably still is, to be honest. How did you justify it in your mind that, hey, I could lose this 6th generation ranch for my family if I don't make a profit?
The short answer is I was scared to death. I went into it having always made a profit, and I really didn't understand how easy it is to lose money in business, because I had inherited a profitable business and did a good job running it. But when I transitioned over, I did have some years of losses and went from thinking I was bulletproof and it'd be okay to thinking maybe not. But again, the timing on our transition was so fortunate. I did not foresee grass-fed beef becoming a thing. I sold a Whole Foods Market and Publix the first pound of American grass-fed beef that they marketed as American grass-fed beef. And that was just fortuitous. I was just lucky. I didn't see that coming. I just wanted to raise cattle differently. And it yielded a product that at that time was quite in demand.
When you went into this, Will, there's a lot more information about regenerative agriculture, adaptive multi-paddock grazing, holistic, or whatever you want to call it. There's different terms for what some of y'all are doing. Where did you learn that from? Or did you just have to figure it out on your own? Or was there some references? I know Alan Savory's been talking about this stuff for a while, and there's a few names out there. I know you like to reference. I know you talk about Wendell Berry quite a bit as one of your heroes, but where did you learn to do this? Because you were like obviously one of the few early ones.
Yeah, we literally had to figure it out ourselves. My dad was an industrial cattle farmer and good at it. I had learned under him and graduated from the University of Georgia College of Agriculture and beef cattle production, so I knew the technical side of it. I didn't know the real embracing nature side that's our model today. I had to figure it out. But I did, and there were some old people around, and I would talk to them and listen to them. But you mentioned Alan Savory. I really believed I didn't say it out loud, thank God, but I really believed I was the authority on grass-fed beef production. I figured it out, and other people had not. Then I met Alan Savory, and he was light years ahead of me. And it was an humbling experience, and I embraced his tutelage and actually went to his ranch in Africa and spent a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I interviewed Alan several years ago, and it's mentioned when you talk to him because I try to get specifics out of him, and he's very much not specific. He's just like, this is management. It varies and it changes depending on where you are, and you can't really just say these rules always apply. And as you've pointed out, that you were very fortunate, not only in the timing, but in the property that you'd had. It was maybe perhaps even ideally situated for what you wanted to do. And had you been in maybe dusty West Texas, I don't know. Maybe you could or could not have done it.
You're right. This is a wonder. In the coastal plain of Georgia, is a wonderful place, or the coastal plain of the southern U.S., let's just say that, is a wonderful place to do what we do. And I've traveled a lot. And when I go to other ecosystems, I look around and it's just I'm painfully aware that I would have no idea how to get started. I think I know how to do it really well here, but it's a very specific understanding of this ecosystem.
When you first started, like I said, initially you said your metric was how many pounds can I pack on my cattle every day? And you just said, I'm not going to do that monthly. I mean, what were you measuring at that time? Was there something you're looking at, how much grass can I grow? Or what were you trying to figure out at that point when you said this industrial model is not for me, I disagree with the way it's done? What were you using
the way
as,
I came to that
tool?
Decision, yeah, the way I came to that decision is not much to my credit. I was such an excessive industrial producer. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I wasn't going towards anything. I was going away from something. I was ceasing to use hormone implants, ceasing to use ionophores, ceasing to use subtherapeutic antibiotics, pesticides, chemical fertilizers, GMOs. It was all about getting away from something and not really moving towards anything. I was just very fortunate in that when I moved away from all those industrial tools, a market was created, not by me, but it had been developing that allowed me to profitably market my, at that time, only beef. Since then, we've added a lot of other species.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing, the multi-species grazing. I know guys like Joel Salatin have been big proponents of that. And has that been something that has added to, I guess, obviously the product with different things, but has it added to the regenerative nature of the landscape? Has it further improved just what you could do with cattle by adding these species in?
Absolutely. Proper food production has got to embrace emulation of nature. And when you're emulating nature, you don't just do it with one species, because I don't think you can come up with a single natural ecosystem in the world that just has one species of animal or plant or microbe. It's always a plethora of species living in symbiotic relationships with each other. And that's what we try to emulate here. And moving the cattle, moving the animals regularly is part of that emulation of nature. Everything is an imperfect emulation of nature. I wish it was perfect, but it's not. We do the best we can.
Yeah, it's interesting. You might find some humor in this. I had a quote unquote debate with some vegan activists, and they told me that they found nature problematic and that they think that humans would do better if we would overlay the world with our infrastructure, which I just had a nice chuckle with. Yeah, exactly is what I thought.
Nature will bat last, and she will win.
Yeah, that's a very insightful statement for sure. Just with regard, you said monocrop, whether it's soybeans or corn or cattle, this is a problem. And when we have this sort of natural system, food production, so what you talk about, multi-species, different plants, different insects, different ruminants and monogastrics and all these different animals on there. Do you feel that the overall productivity of your land is more productive in not only just food, but also in other products? But I'm particularly interested in, because a lot of people will say they took a pasture that the soil had been depleted, and they've been doing the same thing for 50 years. And all of a sudden now they're able to get more yield. They're able to grow more grass. They're able to feed more animals. Have you found that your overall productivity in total with not just beef, but food in general has improved?
But that's a great question. And this isn't an answer I want to give, but I'm going to tell you how it works. If your only goal is to maximize yield, the industrial monocultural system using all the technologies is what you want to do. Are you there, Doctor?
I'm here. Yeah, I can hear you well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. If your only goal is to maximize yield, a monoculture using all the technological tools is the way to do it. Sadly, that winds up resulting in a lot of unintended consequences. To raise 300 or 400 bushel corn, the way they can do it in an industrial model, requires incredible amounts of chemical nitrogen that just burns up the organic matter in the soil. And we can just go on and on. All these monocultural tools that technology has given us have a great cost. And so it depends on how you keep your books. If you monitor all of the ramifications of your model, the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico where everything washes down, species extinction, on and on. We can talk about change, the negative occurrences that happen in the industrial model have got to be in the calculation. And if they're in the calculation, then our production model is much higher.
When, you've obviously, it's almost a rediscovery of how agriculture was. There was a point in time where we didn't have this industrial model. Some would point to World War II. Some would point to Earl Butz in the 70s saying, go big or go home or something like that. Was there a period of time where what you were doing was the standard? And are there places in the world where this still is the standard?
I don't know about other places in the world where it is the standard. I hadn't traveled that much. There probably is. There are individual farms in this country that are doing a wonderful job. And you're right, there was not a one-day starting point when we changed everything. But I think that probably World War II was the biggest change we made. All that technology for explosives, for tear gas, for the mechanization, moving from mules to diesel equipment. All these things that were part of the war effort were easily transferred into the food production effort. And we did it. My dad's generation did a fantastic job embracing that very significant change in direction.
You said that when you transitioned from the industrial model to the regenerative model, it was challenging. You could have gone broke. If certain things, coincidences and luck didn't play a role, you might not have made it. What were those difficulties you encountered? And do you think there's a way, like if we were to transform the entire food production system in the U.S., not that maybe that happened, maybe it won't, I don't know. I'd love to see it happen. But what are the major roadblocks to doing? Is it the land itself, or is it more the system in your mind?
No, it's the system. This thing that we have started referring to as greenwashing is a real thing, and it's an impediment to a genuine change in production methods. I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but when I started marketing grass-fed beef to Whole Foods Market and Publix and Kroger and the other big grocery chains in the very early 2000s, beef could not be brought into this country and labeled as product of the USA. You couldn't do that. There was literally a change in the law. I think it was in 2005. That now allows beef to be brought in, born, raised, and slaughtered in 20 countries, brought into this country and marketed as product of the USA. And it was that had to be a very intentional change in the rule that was specifically done to allow big meat companies to bring product into the country. And when it did, it really hurt those of us in this country who were trying to change the production model.
Yeah, we had the cool country of origin labeling that was in effect until I think about 2015. I think it was struck down in 2015 with a lot of support from, I'm surprised the NCBA actually supported the removal of that. And I think because we have a lot of this ground beef that's the trim that they sell from other countries. And yeah, it's a real problem. You should be able to know where your beef comes from. I think that's a fair statement, right?
Well, the NCBA is National Cattlemen's Beef Association. I'm not sure which nation they represent. I don't think it's the United States of America.
I've dealt with them. I'm trying to get them to help me get some research done on beef and disease, and it's been an uphill battle. I got to admit. I don't know if you saw. I know you've been on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple times. I was on recently, and I basically said, "Look, these guys are not helping." And when I look at stats, 500,000 ranchers out of business since the 70s, beef consumption down 35% since the 70s. I don't know how good the beef checkoff has done, in promoting beef consumption. I'm a huge advocate of it, obviously, as you're probably aware.
I'm a non-advocate.
You're a non-advocate.
I'm a non-advocate. I don't know what that word is, but I'm opposed to it.
When you talk about this, like I said, this is because I think this is important. I'm paying reasonable attention to what's going on at COP28, the UNFAO, talking about how we're going to save the climate. And they have some recommendations for agriculture, which obviously impact us all one way or the other. They are actually, it seems to be more supportive of what you're doing. They're talking about let's change the agricultural system in a way that's more sustainable to the environment, creates better biodiversity, all things that you've been doing and talking about for now a couple of decades. Have you been aware of that? In your mind, let's say I could swap Tom Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture, out with Will Harris. What would you do different if you had all that power? Will, what would you do?
It would be focused on the incredible budget that they have, that they use, would be focused not on subsidizing the production of commodity crops like soybeans and corn and cotton and peanuts and whatever else. It would be towards moving the production model to a model that is more in keeping with nature, the natural system. And specifically, I hadn't given that a lot of thought because I don't think I'm a candidate for that. But I do want to call your attention to the fact that you mentioned the ecological benefit. On our website, whiteoakpastures.com, is a study that was done by Qantas, very unbiased, environmental scientific outfit, showing that our cattle operation is actually carbon negative. We actually our cattle sequester more carbon than they emit. And it's time to quit arguing about it. There's the scientific work. And they compare what we do, people like, not just us, people like us, what we do to the industrial feedlot model. And that's not the comparison. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, even within grass-finished or grass-fed, grass-finished beef, there's still, depending on how it's done, I've talked to guys like Greg Judy, who said he calls it the Columbus method. You turn animals out in May and you round them up in October. That's not the way you manage these guys because they just chew the stuff down to the dirt, and it's actually degradative to the environment. And so I think people just think, if I just have grass-fed beef, it's going to be enough. Whereas what you're doing is actually, and I know through the Savory Hub, and I don't know if you're part of that, but they have this environmental outcome verification system where it says, look, these guys are actually improving the biodiversity. And I think that's an important distinction. Am I incorrect in that, Will?
You are exactly right. We are a Savory Hub, and we do participate in the EOV, ecological outcome verification, that you referenced. It's not the only way of doing it, but it's a great way of doing it.
Obviously, you've been able to make a profit. You've turned Bluffton, Georgia around, where you're from a dying, almost ghost town into an area of resurgence. And you've talked about the death of rural America, which is clearly occurring. Everybody's moving to the coast. Everybody's farmland's turning into strip malls. And it really is a shame to see that. Are you seeing a growth of what you do? Do you see an appreciable, because I'm sure you talk to other ranchers, and ranchers probably have sought your advice on how to get started and things like that. Is this movement growing in your mind?
Sadly, I don't think it's growing much, if it's growing at all. And I think that it was, as I said, when I started changing the direction of my farm, I really wasn't. I didn't consider myself to be part of any movement, but the movement started, and it was in the same direction I was in. I was proud to be part of it. And there was a time that I believed that I was an early innovator in changing the way we're going to produce food in this country. I didn't say that out loud, but I thought it. And it hadn't quite worked out that way. Some of the regulations, big food getting in the regenerative claim business, I don't see the ball moving far down the field. I think I see less people doing what I'm doing today than I did 10 years ago. I can't back that up statistically. I just know more people have gone out of business than have gone in business. Now, I want to say this. When I transitioned in the late 90s, I was operating on a fairly large scale for this part of the country as an industrial cattle producer. And when I decided to transition, I really didn't think about the scale. I had what I had, and I started transitioning it. And in retrospect, it was probably too much. I probably would have done better quicker if I downsized a little bit. Today, a lot of the people that are moving into this are doing it on a very micro level. And I think that's fine if that's what you want. But I think that the decision on what scale am I going to operate this thing is a very important question. And you've got to know how big your market is, what your production capacity is, what your land capability is. There's some things you really got to know. But just to say, I'm going to be a regenerative food producer and my grandmama's got 40 acres of land or 4,000 acres of land, and that's what I'm going to do. It's a lot. There's a lot more to it than that. We formed a nonprofit called CFAR, Center for Agricultural Resilience, that is purely to help people make that kind of decision. Well, I can't show you how to make money doing this necessarily, but we can help you decide how to transition or move into this space.
Yeah. Okay. And can you look at a farm and say, don't do it? Or would you go out to somebody in, I don't know, northern North Dakota or southern Texas and say, hey, just don't do this? Would there be a point where you say you got to have these resources to make this successful? Or do you think the right person can do it just about anywhere? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think there's, if that land supported an ecosystem before we humans screwed it up, then there's that potential there. And land, and my friend Gabe Brown's in North Dakota. He's my best friend. He farms great. I guess if you're on top of I've never been to Antarctica, and I guess you can get on top of a glacier in Antarctica and it probably won't work. I know about that. But any ecosystem, I've been around a lot. In any ecosystem that I have ever visited, the capability is there for it to produce an abundance. And if that ecosystem can produce an abundance and you can harvest it and market it, you got the potential for a farm and a food center.
Do you need to, obviously the financial considerations are there. You can't get away from the reality of you've got to turn a profit to be able to farm. Do you have to go direct to consumer? I know you've had success getting into some of the retail market, but most people are going to have a really hard time doing that. Maybe they might get in one local grocery store perhaps, but can you be like a cow-calf operator and just say, I'm just doing cow-calf, I can regenerate my land this way? Does that make sense? Or do you have to do from weaning or from birth to the dinner plate? What is the model that has to be in place? Or is there no such thing?
So somebody's got to do from birth to the dinner plate. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same guy. It could be a situation where I'm the cow-calf guy. I've got a partner that's handling the grass finishing and another partner that's handling slaughter, and maybe another partner that's handling food distribution. That could be beautiful. It requires a lot. It's not what I do, because when I did it, I didn't have any partners. I had to either do it all myself or not do it, one or the other. I think that what you just said can be a beautiful system, and you got to work out the dynamics. You got to see what you got to work with. I think in our case, I wish I never had to go into the meat production business, the slaughter business. It's expensive. It's technical. It's highly regulated. I can list a bunch of other things that I don't particularly like about it. But I'm so glad I was able to go into it, because I would not have been able to do what we've done had I not. It's what we do here is very cyclical. What I used to do in the cow-calf is very linear. I was one link in that chain, that very linear chain that goes from the grass, the farm, to the consumer. To become a food production system, I went from being a cow-calf producer to a little bitty tiny food production system. And that's what you got to do, but you don't have to do it all. If you can find partners to do other parts of it, I urge you to do that. It would make life so much simpler and so much safer.
This is not, you talk about cycles. Right now, we're in a drought cycle. I know a lot of cattle ranchers said, man, it's tough. We're having a hard time feeding our animals, and it's killing some going under because of that. Has your system been resilient to that? Are you less impacted by these sort of, cyclical droughts and things like that because of what you've done with your ecosystem?
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. And I don't want to tell you, please understand, I'm not being so arrogant to say we're drought proof here. No. I would never say that. But truly, the life cycle assessment I referenced earlier will show you that we have moved this farm from 0.5% organic matter to 5% organic matter, 10x increase in carbon in the soil. 1% organic matter will absorb a 1-inch rain event. That's about 27,000 gallons on an acre of land. So if you've got 5% organic matter, which we do, the land will absorb a 5-inch rain event. Now, not if it comes in 30 minutes, but if it comes in a front that lasts 3 days. So the land becomes far more drought resistant if it's healthy. And the way for it to be healthy is to raise the organic matter. And I want to say this, when we talk about organic matter and carbon, that there's been too much talk about carbon. Carbon is essential. It's part of the system, but it's no more important than the microbes in the soil or the minerals in the soil or the radiation. It's just one part, and I fear we get carried away talking about carbon, and it's just too much conversation about only that.
Yeah, one thing I've heard, and you may be able to corroborate this, is that as you improve the soil, you can retain more water. It's not washed off and topsoil's not eroded away with every rain event. It actually changes the local weather. I've heard that the actual microclimate can change. I know there's a regenerative rancher down in Chihuahua, Mexico, Alejandro, and I can't remember his last name, but I think he's noted that the actual weather pattern in your local area changes. Have you noted that at all?
I believe it. No, I can't say I have any documentation of that, but I'm familiar with the work in Mexico you referenced and that farmer, and he's great, and he believes it. And if he believes it, then I suspect it's probably right. I just don't have any evidence that I can lift up for that, but I do believe it.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I grew up, I was born in the 60s, grew up in the 70s. I remember driving around in my dad's car, or even as a teenager, I remember I'd drive through the countryside and my windshield would be plastered with bugs. It'd be annoying because you're having to clean your windshield every damn day or two. Now I drive around and I never hit a bug. Is that something you've noticed, and is that something you've changed in Bluffton? Is there more bugs in Bluffton now?
There is. And it is something I've noticed, and it is something that worries me. The studies are out there, how many species have been driven into extinction, and I don't know that number, but it's a lot. And truly, the ecosystem, when you spray insecticides and pesticides of all kinds out, thousands of pounds per acre per year, you can expect it's going to kill a lot of stuff. And it's not just killing one thing. And I got a lot of stories about that, but we have a frog here, toads, and when they hatch, it's just, I don't know, there may be hundreds of thousands of them. As a kid, it wasn't real uncommon to stumble on a hatch, and the ground was just covered with these tiny little frogs, and birds were eating them and some were getting away. And I went for years and didn't see that and didn't think about them and forgot about them. And a few years ago, I was driving through my pasture and I drove through a hatch. The memory rushed back. And there are many other examples of that.
Yeah, that's because you mentioned when insects die, things that feed on birds and reptiles also die. And so it has this huge upstream effect. And because most of us are like, it's a damn insect. They're a pain anyway. No one likes mosquitoes, but they serve a role in the ecosystem, even though it's annoying when they bite you. But and I've seen statistics in the United States, This is probably a conservative estimate. I think the billions of pounds of pesticides we spray every year ends into the death of something like 4 quadrillion insects a year, which is an unfathomably large number. And that's probably not even all of it. It's probably quite a bit more than that.
One of the ancient Greeks said, for every pestilence that nature sends, she sends the cure. And I so believe that. And nobody hates mosquitoes any more than I do. But I bet those little bastards are doing something. There's some positive reason for them being here. And I think that every time we take a technology that wipes out a species, it wipes out a bunch of other species, and B, whatever that species did for the system isn't being done anymore.
Let me ask you, Will, because I see analogies in healthcare. When I see physicians that are practicing, I would almost call it a regenerative health style, where they're using nutrition and lifestyle to treat disease, they generally are happier people as physicians than when they are practicing in the industrial medical model, where all you're doing is throwing drugs at everything. Are you happier as a farmer, as a rancher today than you were when you were gung-ho as an industrial guy? Do you notice a difference in your own quality of life and your own personal satisfaction when you do this?
It ain't even close. And I thought I was happy then. I've always enjoyed what I did, but I love what I do.
There's no higher aspiration than loving what you do. You've got a huge team now. When you started, it wasn't that big, but what does your team look like these days? I know you've got, I think, maybe 100 employees, or I can't remember. I can't remember exactly the numbers.
I think it's about 170. I know it's $100,000 a week to pay them. I know that. I got to get every Friday. I got to come up with it from somewhere. I got really good people. I'm blessed. I'm sitting in Clay County, Georgia. And Clay County was the poorest county in the United States of America in 2020. So we're the largest private employer in the county, and we're able to draw just wonderful people. And we draw a lot of people that aren't from here. A lot of people move here to be here. But the way the team looks is there are 6 of us that run the business. Me, 2 daughters, 2 in-laws, and 2 non-family members. There may be 7. That's who it is. Those 7 people supervise about 20 managers, some of whom are local people, some of whom are these really talented, skilled, wonderful people that moved here to be here. And then those 20 people supervise the other 140-something that are left. And I'm very pleased with the team we've got here. It's just a lot of fun.
I assume you eat your own food. I assume what you grow, you tend to eat as well, I would imagine. I sure as heck would. It'd be nice to have I feel nice when there's cows around. I just think it's a good situation to be in. But do you like, from a taste standpoint, does this taste better to you now? Do you knowing how you've produced it?
It does. It feels more right to me. I've eaten in these really fancy 5-star restaurant, white tablecloth restaurants, and that food's good. It's probably industrially produced, but they know exactly what to do with it, and it's seasoned beautifully, and it tastes great. We've got a restaurant here on the farm, and we serve 21 meals a week, and I eat about 21 meals a week in that restaurant, and it's always good to me. It's probably not. It certainly wouldn't reach the culinary levels of a white tablecloth restaurant in Atlanta or DC or New York or somewhere. But it's good. And I want to say this, how good it tastes is important. But there are some horrible foods out there that you can eat that taste really good, addictively good. So I don't think we need to use, if it's like a dose of medicine, you're not going to eat it. It's not a good deal. But when I first started trying to market my beef, again, my degree was in animal science. Marketing was not something I had any concept of, and still I'm blind to it. But I thought I needed to say everything I could that was good about my beef. And I talked about how good it tastes and how tender it was. It's not that damn tender. I'm going to go and tell you the truth. It's not. It's all right. Not. all the things I could think of to say that was good about it. And then I realized how wrong that was, and that really the benefit of my product was to the land and the animal and the community.
In your book, you talk about when you first started marketing the stuff, you would have to go to grocery stores and stand around and talk about your beef. And you're like, I don't really want to do this. Isn't fun. But I'm sure you got to meet a lot of your customers and that type of stuff. And like you said, you think the product is what it is, and people either get it or they don't, basically.
Yeah, that was a requirement when I first started with Publix and with Whole Foods. And it was terrible. I'd rather have my butt whipped with a piece of barbed wire than do that. But I'm so glad I went through it, because it forced me to listen to those people that I needed to listen to. And they taught me a lot.
I'm sure there's ranchers out there that are considering doing what you've done or others like you have done. And they're like, maybe they're on the fence. Maybe they don't know what to do. If you had to start again, Will, I assume you would have still done it, but you would have done some things differently. How would you approach it today in hindsight, given the 20-some years of experience you've had in doing this thing?
Well, there's a couple of things I'll say about that. One is I used to be a real ambassador. I thought I was an ambassador to recruiting people to produce food this way. If I was on an airplane with you or sitting beside you at a meeting or something, and you said you were farming and thinking about becoming less industrial, I would have tried to talk you into it. And I quit doing that because I came to realize people can go broke doing that. I mean, I can talk somebody in, I might be able to talk them into doing it. And if I do, they could go broke doing it. So I really had to moderate that. But I do want people to do this, and I did form the nonprofit I mentioned to train people. I think I told you about that, as to how to go about doing it. And mostly, I would exercise caution. Just because you have access to a piece of land and got the desire to return it to a more natural perspective doesn't mean you can make it in the food business. You've got to have a lot more going for you than that. And got to be some very specific plans made in terms of finance, in terms of processing, marketing, those kinds of things. But I am an advocate. I do want to see people do this. And as a result, we've got an intern program that we take 6 or 7 interns per quarter, 4 quarters a year, to help them do that. We get about 20-something applications and only take 6. So we're very selective. And I want to do all I can to help people move in this direction, but I don't want to break them.
Let me ask you, there's a thought, those people that want to end animal agriculture because it's for various reasons. Maybe they're plant-based, vegan, ethical vegans. And they think we can just rewild the land. And if you just take a patch of land and you just don't do anything to it, let's say it's reclaimed farmland, we just say we're not going to do anything to it. What's going to happen to that land? Is it going to thrive automatically? Is nature going to come in and clean everything up, you think, eventually? Or does it require some sort of human sort of directed change?
That's a little bit like saying how long is a string, but I would say that it would require, so you can't, if you rewilded from Canada to Mexico so that large ruminant herds can rotate seasonally back and forth, I'm sure it'd be fine. But we don't have those kinds of land masses. In my case here, we've got 3,200 acres. And if you would never get it in balance. I don't know how you would go about getting the carnivore. First of all, when this land was first settled, civilized, there were woods bison here, and there were black bear and other carnivores. We don't have that anymore. I would think the first thing that would happen would be the white-tailed deer would overgraze it, and you'd wind up with a desert. A lot can go wrong.
Yeah, I know they've got issues like feral hogs down in Texas are destroying everything, and so there's. Again, you're right. The ecosystems have changed in a way that for whatever reason that it may not return to nature like we think it would, where we had in the pre-European contact area in the United States, we had 30, 50, 60, 100 million, bison running around. That number's debatable, but it's something like that. And would that naturally occur today? Unknown. It's unknown if that would occur.
We too have feral pigs. We call them wild hogs, but they're not an indigenous species. They were brought here. And we've gotten things way out of balance. If people just disappeared out of the equation, it would all balance back out eventually. But to say I'm going to take this 100,000, 10,000 acres of land, doesn't matter how big it is, and just back off of it and leave it alone, it's not going to be the same thing as herds of bison migrating from Canada to Mexico.
Yeah. Is there anything you're paying attention to these days? When you hear the news, I see things in the news and sometimes I shake my head. But I guess particularly when it comes to what you do, there's legislature being proposed. Tom Massey talking about his Prime Act. There's trying to resurrect the Cool Act. There's other laws, just 30-30 law that they're trying to restrict how much land people have access to. What's on your horizon? You're like, this may be either helpful or significantly detrimental to what you want to do or what you think you should do.
I'm very lost in that. I used to have an opinion, and some of my opinions didn't work out like I thought. I don't know. I know that the direction our food system is moving in is bad. Maybe it just is. Certified organic vegetables that are raised in a greenhouse in unnatural light and without soil, but they're certified organic, fake meat, on and on. We just list all the things that we seem to be in one way or another moving towards that are against the natural systems that got us this far. So I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work out. I do know this, that we need change, and nothing brings about change like pain. It's just as simple as that. There's seldom any meaningful change without pain. And I had hoped that we were going to move into a kinder, gentler food production system without all that pain. But I think I see now that, nope, that's not how that's going to work. And I don't know how it's going to manifest itself, how it's going to look. But I do know that we're going further and further in a wrong direction.
Yeah,
food.
I completely agree with that, Will. And as you said, and as I've said, because a lot of people out there listening to this may say, this is friggin' depressing. What can I do about it? And I still believe that the market demand will dictate what is done. And I think if enough people say, hey, look, I don't want to support this hyper-processed garbage commodity, whatever, monocrop system, then I can vote every day with my pocketbook. And that's what I tell people to do. Vote with because you get one vote in a presidential election every 4 years. You get to vote every 365 days a year by what you buy and consume and support. And I know you've talked about that. Is that a fair assessment?
I couldn't be more in agreement with you. I'm positive that meaningful change won't come from government. It won't come from big food. It won't come from big tech. It won't come from the universities. I can list dozens of places it won't come from. Multinational food companies, no. When it comes, if it comes, it will come from consumers that make the decision, this is what I'm going to do. The question that I get asked that I hate, I'll go ahead and mention it, is what about the people that can't afford it? And I worry about that. I don't know. Those that can afford it have got to do it. Then we've got to figure that out.
As you could probably, your father, grandfather, back then food was a significant expense. Today, it's a small expense, and it probably needs to be a more significant expense again, because so you may not need the latest electronic gizmo, but you need to nourish yourself correctly, and you need to nourish yourself in a way that doesn't lead to the end of our end of the health of our species is what we're seeing there. I think back in the 1930s, I think food was like a 30% of your annual budget. Now it's something like 6% or something like that. I can't remember the numbers, but they've gone down significantly.
I'm very grateful to you people who are public figures that set the examples and carry the message that's so important. And I'm very proud of what I have figured out in terms of how to do it. But I'm not the guy to talk about it. I'm happy to respond to questions. I appreciate being on with you today, but I'm very grateful to you people who are focused on the messaging of helping people understand what's better.
Yeah, obviously there's no one man that's going to do that. I know. And I told people from the beginning, don't rely on me. Everybody needs to share this message. Get your own social media account, get on YouTube, start talking to your friends. It's the only way this grows. It's not going to grow by vertical growth. It's going to grow by horizontal growth. And I think we have to have literally millions of people that will say that. And I think we are making some progress. I really do. I see it growing. There people are starting to push back. And you mentioned the pain point. You just got to look around. And you go to any grocery store, you look around, everybody's sick. Everybody looks sick. I imagine when you grew up as a kid, you didn't see the rampant obesity and the absolute lack of vitality that we see today. And food is probably the biggest factor driving that, in my view. So I think that pain point is coming if we're not already there. And I know the tech answer is we're just going to medicate everybody. We'll make you forget about your misery. We'll give you antidepressants and give you these weight loss drugs that who knows what they're going to do over a 20-year period of time. But you're right. Technology, big tech, well, they're doubling down on what has been harmful to us. And like I said, that's not the solution in my view. So we have to collectively do this. Will, thank you very much for doing this. We're running out of time, unfortunately. Do people come out and visit White Oaks? Do you guys allow visitors and stuff like that, like a visitor center, stuff like that for people who want to see what's going on, or what's the deal out there?
We don't just allow it. We encourage it. We have a store here. We have a restaurant that serves 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We've got lodging. I built some cabins. We really do all we can do to urge people to come here. That's the first step. And the shield and sword we have is transparency. You can look at it. What do you want to see? You tell me.
Very nice. I've got some relatives in Alpharetta, Georgia, which I think maybe it was about 3-4 hour drive from where you are. Yeah. I'm thinking something like that. Maybe next time I'm out there, I'll zip on down if you don't mind and say hi or visit. I'd love to see it.
I'd love to have you and your family come spend the night. Bring your Alpharetta relatives and we'll show them White Oak Pastures. I'm delighted. Our advertising budget is zero. What we do is urge people to come here and see what we do. I can't message in a manner that competes with big multinational food companies. I can't come up with the right words, but I can show you.
Absolutely. Well, it's a bold return to giving a damn. Will Harris, Amazon, I suppose you can get a bookstore, things like that. What about a website? Somebody wants to learn more about what you do and learn more about White Oaks. Where do they go?
WhiteOakPastures.com.
All right.
There's Instagram and all that stuff, and I don't know how to do that, but WhiteOakPastures.com.
Yeah, I imagine you got better things to do than junk or screw around on social media.
I don't know if they're any better, but I'm probably more capable of doing them.
Yeah. All right. Awesome.